Welcome to a deep dive all about mastering memory. You've given us a pretty diverse collection of materials this time around.
Yeah, good mix.
We've got YouTube videos in Hindi and English, an article on memory techniques, even some of your own personal notes. It seems like you're really serious about taking your memory to the next level.
Absolutely.
So what insights can we unearth from all this? Let's dive in.
I think what's really cool about these sources is that they all kind of highlight how memory is about more than just how much you can cram in there. It's about how you make those initial connections, that encoding process.
Encoding. Okay, so we've got this Hindi YouTube video that breaks down Bloom's taxonomy, which sounds intimidating, but it's basically a 6-level framework for achieving expertise.
Right.
And then there's this English YouTube video that dives into techniques from Kevin Horsley's book, Unlimited Memory, and an article with 10 steps to memorize anything straight from memory experts.
Wow.
So where do we even begin with all of this?
Well, Bloom's taxonomy is interesting because each source uses it kind of differently. The Hindi video uses it like a stepladder, right? You move from basic memorization all the way up to creating something totally new.
Yeah.
But the article uses it more for self-assessment, like figuring out where your strengths lie in the learning process.
So it's not just about reaching the top level every time. It's more about understanding your own learning style.
Exactly.
That's really interesting. I always thought I had a terrible memory, but maybe I'm just not using the right techniques. One thing that really blew my mind was this statistic from one of the YouTube videos. Apparently, we forget something like 82% of what we learned after just 28 days.
Oh, wow.
No wonder I feel like I'm constantly relearning things.
Right. That's why we're here, to equip you with the tools to actually retain that information.
Okay, let's talk about some of those tools. Both the article and the English YouTube video mention this ancient technique called the memory palace.
Ah, yes.
The memory palace.
It sounds almost magical. It does have this mystical air about it, but it actually taps into your brain's natural strengths.
Yeah.
We're wired for visual imagery and spatial awareness.
Right.
The memory palace just takes advantage of that.
They use this example of remembering a grocery list using your own home as the palace.
Ah.
I'm trying to picture it. Like imagining a giant carton of milk spilling over my front door to remember to buy milk.
Precisely. And it gets even more powerful when you add in sensory details, Don't just see the milk. Imagine the sound of it splashing, the cold temperature, the smell.
Oh.
The more senses you involve, the stronger that memory becomes.
So instead of just a boring list, I'm creating this bizarre multi-sensory story in my mind using my own home as the setting.
I have to admit it, I'm intrigued. But what if you're not a visual person? Are there other techniques that might work better?
Oh, absolutely. The memory palace is a classic, but it's definitely not the only way to make information stick.
Right.
There are a bunch of techniques that tap into different cognitive strengths. Some people really connect with creating associations, for example, like that trick of picturing Einstein moonwalking to remember his name.
Exactly. You're linking new information to something you already know, making it easier to recall. And then you've got spaced repetition, which is all about timing your review sessions to outsmart your brain's natural forgetting curve.
Yeah.
Think flashcards, but smarter. There are even apps that can help you optimize the process.
Speaking of apps, I have to admit I've tried those flashcard apps, but I just don't stick with them. I guess I struggle with that whole active recall thing. I'm much more of a passive learner.
I hear you. Active recall can definitely be a challenge, but it's seriously one of the most powerful techniques out there. In fact, Han Zango, the creator of one of the YouTube videos you sent, actually shared this personal story about how active recall helped them overcome their struggles with memorization and really excel in school.
Yeah, it's amazing how much of a difference active recall can make. It's like the difference between reading a recipe and actually cooking a meal. You can read about it all you want, but until you actually put it into practice, it doesn't really sink in. That's a great analogy. I'm starting to think maybe I've been giving myself too much of a pass when it comes to memorization. I've always told myself that I'm just not good at it.
Yeah.
But what if I just haven't found the right approach yet? What if I could actually train my brain to remember things better?
You absolutely can. It's incredible. And the English YouTube video we have here actually highlights Kevin Horsley's 4 C's from his book, Unlimited Memory.
Okay.
He reportedly absorbs like 4 books a week using these techniques.
4 books a week? That's insane. Okay. I'm all ears. What are these magical 4 Cs?
So the first one is concentration.
Oh, okay.
It's all about building those focus muscles, really being present when you're learning something new. Horsley talks a lot about finding your purpose. Like, why are you learning this? How can it be relevant to your life?
I can see how that would make a huge difference. If you're not interested in what you're learning, your mind's just going to wander off.
Yeah.
But what if the material itself is just boring? Like, how are you supposed to concentrate on something that just doesn't grab your attention?
Well, that's where the second C comes in. Create imagery. It's about transforming that dry information into something vivid and memorable.
Okay.
It's not about having a photographic memory. It's more about using your imagination to make the information come alive.
The video had this great example about turning a list of superfoods into this wacky car scene. Like picturing a giant carrot jammed through the hood of the car, and the windshield was made of whole wheat bread.
Exactly. And the more outlandish that image, the more likely you are to remember it. It's like creating your own little mental movie.
So it's not about sourcing yourself to memorize facts and figures. It's about finding a way to make it fun and engaging.
Exactly.
That definitely appeals to me.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got concentrations, create imagery. What's next?
All right, the third C is connect concepts. This is where you link new information to something you already know well. Think of it like building a bridge between the new and the familiar.
So kind of like the memory palace technique, where you're using familiar locations to store information.
It is a similar idea. The key is to find a way to make that new information feel relevant and connected to your existing knowledge web.
Okay. And the final C, continuous use.
Yes.
I have a feeling this one's going to be tough for me. I tend to learn something and then immediately forget it if I don't use it right away.
Well, continuous use is all about outsmarting that forgetting curve. It's
Yep.
like tending a garden. You can't just plant the seeds and walk away. You have to water them, fertilize them, protect them from pests.
Right.
Similarly, if you want your memories to flourish, you gotta nourish them with regular review-based repetition, active recall.
So it's not about cramming everything in at once. It's about building those memories over time.
Exactly. Now, there's one more concept I want to touch on before we move on. And this one really blew my mind. The Hindi YouTube video talked about this study where they gave Asian American girls math tests.
Oh, yeah, I think I've heard of this.
Yeah, one group was asked to think about their identity as girls, while the other group focused on their identity as Asians.
I remember reading about that study. The results were fascinating.
Weren't they?
The girls who focused on their Asian identity actually performed better, even though they were all roughly equal in math ability.
It really highlights the power of self-image, If you believe you're bad at something, you're less likely to succeed.
Yeah.
And the same goes for memory. If you keep telling yourself, I have a bad memory, you're actually undermining your own abilities.
So step one to mastering memory is believing that you can actually do it.
Absolutely. It's about shifting your mindset from, I'm bad at this, to, I can learn and improve. It's like giving yourself permission to succeed.
Okay, I'm starting to feel more optimistic already. But it's one thing to believe in yourself. It's another thing to actually put these techniques into practice. Where do we even begin with all these different methods?
Well, the article you sent actually had some really interesting tips, especially when it comes to making information more emotionally engaging.
Okay.
Think about it. We tend to remember events that are emotionally charged much more vividly than everyday occurrences.
That's true. I can still remember every detail of the day I graduated college, but I can barely remember what I had for breakfast yesterday.
Exactly. So one of the keys to remembering information is to find a way to tap into those emotions. If you're learning about history, for example, try to imagine yourself actually living through those events. Feel the excitement, the fear, the joy, the sorrow.
Yeah.
It's like turning history into a story that you're actually a part of.
And by engaging your emotions, you create a much richer and more lasting memory.
Precisely. The article also talked about the importance of attaching personal meaning to the information you're trying to learn.
So it's not just about memorizing facts in isolation. It's about finding a way to connect them to your own life experiences.
Exactly. For example, if you're trying to learn about some scientific concept, think about how it applies to your daily life or to a hobby you're passionate about. Maybe you can even connect it to a personal story or anecdote. The more you can personalize that information, the more likely it is to stick.
This is all great, but I have to admit, I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed. It seems like there's so much to remember. It's almost like I need a memory technique just to remember all the memory techniques.
I hear you. It can definitely feel like a lot at first, but remember, the key is to find what works for you.
Right.
Experiment with different techniques, combine them, adapt them to your own learning style. There's no one-size-fits-all approach.
That's reassuring.
Yeah.
So before we wrap up this memory mastery marathon, is there anything else we should keep in mind? Any big picture takeaways?
Well, I think it's important to remember that a healthy brain is a powerful brain. You know, all of these techniques are going to be much more effective if you're taking care of your physical and mental well-being.
So we're talking about things like exercise, diet, sleep,
Exactly. All of those things are crucial for brain health.
and I'm guessing stress management plays a role too.
Absolutely. Chronic stress can really wreak havoc on your memory. So finding healthy ways to manage that stress, whether it's through mindfulness meditation or spending time in nature, is essential. It's all about creating an environment where your brain can thrive.
This deep dive has given me so much to think about. It's almost like a whole new world has opened up.
It's pretty exciting, isn't it, to think that we have this incredible power within us to shape our own memories and really unlock our learning potential.
Absolutely. And speaking of unlocking potential, what about all those other techniques that were mentioned in the article? We talked about mnemonics and acronyms, but there were a few others on the list that we haven't really explored yet.
You're right, we haven't even touched on things like chunking or using music and rhythm to aid memory.
Yeah, it feels like we've just scratched the surface here.
Uh-huh.
I'm already trying to think about which techniques I want to try out first. Maybe like create a memory palace for my next grocery shopping trip.
Yeah.
Or turn my to-do list into some wild imaginative story.
There you go. That's the spirit.
Yeah.
You know, it's all about finding what sparks your interest and makes learning a joyful process.
Yeah.
And don't forget those techniques. We didn't have time to really dive into chunking music mnemonics.
Right.
There's a whole world of possibilities at stake.
Chunking, that's the one where you break down big pieces of information into smaller chunks, right?
Exactly.
It's like how we remember phone numbers.
Precisely. Our short-term memory can only hold so much information at once, but by grouping things together, we can increase that capacity. And music and rhythm can be incredibly powerful memory aids, too.
Yeah.
Think about how easily we remember song lyrics,
Oh, yeah.
even if we haven't heard the song in years.
It's true. Some of my earliest memories are linked to songs from my childhood. And I still find myself using rhymes and jingles to remember things.
Yeah.
It's like our brains are naturally wired to respond to music.
They absolutely are. And these techniques, they're not just for fun, you know? They're backed by science.
Right.
Music can actually activate multiple areas of the brain. Wow.
Enhancing both memory encoding and retrieval.
So are you saying we should all be walking around with a soundtrack playing in our heads to boost our memory?
I wouldn't go that far. But incorporating music and rhythm into your learning can definitely be beneficial. You know, maybe you create a rap song about historical dates. Or set your vocabulary list to a catchy tune.
I love that. Turning learning into a musical adventure. Okay, I think I'm finally starting to see the bigger picture here, you know? It's not just about memorizing isolated facts. It's about understanding how our brains work and using that knowledge to unlock our learning potential. It's about finding the joy in the process of learning and remembering.
You got it. And it's a lifelong journey. The more you learn about memory, the more you realize how much more there is to explore.
And the more you practice these techniques, the more you'll be amazed by what your brain can do. It's like we've been given this key to unlock a whole new world of possibilities. Remember, the power to shape your memory lies within you. Embrace the techniques, challenge your limiting beliefs, and just watch your ability to learn, remember, and create soar and play. So tell me, what will you master first using these newfound memory superpowers?
That's the question, isn't it? And I think the best answer is anything I set my mind to.
Yeah.
Thanks for taking this deep dive with me, and to all of you listening, happy remembering.